All right. First of all, really happy to be here. Uh, uh, I'm also one of the organizers of LAS, so I'm really sad that I'm not there to give this talk in person. So uh, with that, I'm going to start my talk. All right. So thanks for coming to using LLMs to lower barriers to write apps. And let me give you a brief idea of who I am. As Chrissy said, I am a GNOME contributor. I've been here a while, since 1997, so almost, I don't know, 28 years, something like that. This feels like a long time ago, and so many things have changed from that time. So I for work I work for Intel Corporation, and I focus on developer relations and ecosystem building. I also do events for them. I do a lot of different things, and you know the funny thing in this app ecosystem, I learned a lot of these skills working on the GNOME project, and you know I wouldn't have this job I had at Intel without um, being in this app ecosystem. So I'm really super grateful to have a job in open source and be able to do my passions. And I'm still learning. Always the things I do in GNOME ends up being something I do at work now. So anyway, that's the premise of this talk. I know LLMs and AI is somewhat controversial in our community. And but regardless, I, I I put this talk together because I really wanted to explore how LLMs could be useful to generate code, and what kind of limitations we have, and what would be ways that we could leverage LLMs today, even though you know that it's controversial. So that's the why I want to get this talk. And uh, I know not everybody knows everything about AI/ML, so I thought I'll do a little quick level set. So there are um, few knows what an LLM is or an SLM is or anything like that. Um, but essentially, they're AI models and based on neural networks that can interpret human requests and generate responses in human terms. Uh, the differences between the LLM and the SLM is the LLM, you need a lot of graphics memory. And you need like these really big data center, 100 gig cards. They're like uh, 20,000 dollars kind of thing, and the small language models are more like something you could put on your laptop or edge device or phones, that kind of thing. And they're a lot smaller because they require less memory and so on. So, but in all of those things, the underlying technology is transformers. And transformers is why we have such a big AI growth. Why we have a big AI growth. And just imagine being able to write and talk. Sorry, I have my notifications are on, and it keeps saying "bing, bing, bing," and it's driving me nuts. Yeah, give me a second here. Hopefully it doesn't uh, keep interrupting me with noise. Anyway, so the transformers is this thing that came out of Google, but this is the real power in the sense that this is how you can do the NLP, natural language processing, all those kinds of things. That's what transfers. And transfers at its basic is converts text into a numerical representation, and then it tries to figure out context between words, right? it knows what a dog or cat is or whatever, and being able to associate all of those things. So when I think about this example, right? What is the color of a bark of a tree, right? So it figures out what color, bark, tree, and what, right? And it does this by transforming these things into tokens. And then using a neural network, the transformers figures out what is the important parts of this thing, and then figures out how to respond, right? So this is the kind of cool things about transformers. And I put this together because we're talking about generative AI, and so when things go wrong, you kind of get a sense of, well, why is it going wrong, right? Because it needs to figure out what the associations are. But the thing is, transformers are the primary means of training LLMs and SLMs, and it's this is the leap forward, and I don't think it's going to go away. So there are a lot of LLMs out there. All of them. I just put a few that's out here. Some of them are kind of old, GPT-3 or GPT-4, and so on. So there's a lot of ones you can pick and choose, and a lot of them can be specialized. There seems to be a plethora of LLMs that can do reasoning. They could be philosophical, and so on. And of course, it's no surprise that there are LLMs that are focused on code. So these are LLMs that are trained on code that you can see on GitHub, GitLab, Stack Overflow, or AI scrapers that are coming in and stopping our work on our various GitLab and basically doing code laundry. I think these are one of the things that are annoying about AI for us, right? It's very controversial, is especially for us where these codes have a specific software license, and it's like money laundering, right? They suck it in and then print out code that based on our stuff that learns from our code and spits it out as public domain. So that's one of the things that is truly vexing about AI. So adventures in code generation. I did not use any of these specialized LLMs. I used ChatGPT because using any of these I would have to use them on either my local machine or my some service, which I already have with ChatGPT. But if I want to use one of those others, it'd be very slow. So if I'm probably showing my age, but those who lived out in the 90s when we were still using modems, it felt like a BBS or bulletin board service at 2400 baud on a modem, and it would just sort of scroll across the screen slowly. And I don't have time for that, so I didn't do it. All the image, just as an aside, all of the images in you see here were generated on ChatGPT. So I do find that a great time saver because a lot of times I want to do something cool like adventures in code generation. There's no way I would be able to create an image or even find an image like this that easily. So I do things at least when giving talks, being able to create images is pretty nice. So the premise of what code did I want to generate in order to write is, and the title of this talk is, does it lower the value of writing apps? And I did have an app I wanted to write, and amongst the other things I do is I do events. And Linux App Summit is one of them that I do as a volunteer, but internally at Intel, I do a lot of events, and those events I have to work with a lot of agencies and everyone. So anytime I have to make a change in the agenda, I have to communicate multiple times, and I wanted something where I could put this agenda on a app and be able to move things around. You don't usually see those things. It's like if you're if if you do it online or whatever, there may be something where you can move the rows and columns, but I didn't couldn't find anything. So I'm like, well, I need to scratch my itch in a true fashion of free software. I decided to write one. It's like, okay, let's see how maybe I can get some help using generative AI to get started. I haven't used GTK since, or wrote code in GTK since GTK2. So it's been a really long time since I've come back and worked on something like this. So it was always coming back after a long time, like, how do you write something, right? And so I started with a Python app because I don't like using C. Too much boilerplate code for me. So and it makes sense for me to do this. So you start off. Of course, I also had to pick the most complex GTK widget I could find, which is GTK column view, which seemed to fit what I wanted to do with this app. So I started with not the real app. I started, let me do a sample. So I said on a prompt, create a sample GTK for Python app using GTK column view, which led to a fun adventure, as I was saying with over here, adventures in code generation, and so I spent a lot of time on this and iteratively, and there are a lot of issues when you're doing code generation. Maybe some of you have run into this as well, and can agree with me. Frequent hallucinations between different versions of GTK. A lot of times it's in there trying to use, it initially tried to set up the app using GTK3 type of stuff, which, it didn't, that wasn't what I wanted. So I had to like explicitly tell them, okay, no, you can't use GTK3, you need to use GTK4. Then frequent hallucinations of API that doesn't exist. Sometimes it really would like to use an API of sometimes it'll use API of a widget, of a different widget, in its attempt to do what I asked. It's really hilarious. I was like, you see the code, I was like, yeah, that's not it. That's not it. And you sort of get a tune of how it's thinking too while it's going through this. And when it doesn't know the answer, it just adds garbage. And one of the things about AI is everything is about predictive, using statistics to be predictive, right? It just thinks what is the most likely next thing, and that, of course, it figures that out based on a lot of training. So if there's not a lot of training behind what I'm asking for, then it's gonna make crap up. And then this one was especially bizarre. You go down there and you keep telling them this is wrong, try this, and then suddenly you find yourself, okay, the LLM, and it does this in such a cheerful, thing, and it feels like this some kind of CD car salesman, or like, this is going to be the best. It's always this cheerful voice that's. I like to think of it as a very enthusiastic puppy. With if you combine a puppy and a programmer, that's the kind of thing. Everything is very, 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 very sort of cringe, actually. But going back to this point, you end up back in the beginning, where it's starting all over from with the same mistakes that it did the first time as it was going through it, and I was like, what the hell is this? And this has happened multiple times. So you waste like 2 hours, and then you're back in the beginning. But I mean, I did make progress. I got somewhere, and maybe further than I thought I would when using an LLM. But it sort of works. But there's definitely when I go back and think about what went through, it does have a kind of mindset when it's generating, and you have to do. And you have to figure out the right prompt to coax the right answer, because it's sort of stuck in its own mind frame, right? So it's very bizarre how it goes through its processing. If you ever looked at like, tells you what it's thinking, and kind of that's funny. I'm confused about this. Maybe to look here. It's sort of an interesting window into the thought process, and the hallucinations. If you look at it, is you're asking. If there's no training materials, the hallucinations comes from that. It's because it doesn't know how to predict it. And so every time I see a hallucination, I think it's some sort of lack of training. Although I'm sure that's not always true. Sometimes it makes out regardless. But that's what I did. I kind of ran into a wall towards the end. Because I was interested in implementing something that I'm not sure there was code written for, at least not from asking around. And it is, and of course, code is everything for these LLMs. So in the end, you get to a point where you do have to figure it out yourself. So after a while doing vibe programming, I don't know if anybody's heard of vibe programming. It's it's some new thing that's come out, some kind of new moniker. And the idea is that non-programmers can use an LLM and completely write an app by just asking the LLM to do the code, right? And probably really high level, write a website. I want to look like this, that kind of thing. I'm not sure that's like the best. And the idea of non-programmers writing code seems very cringe. There's so as software developers, when we look at our code, it's always I always think like it's a series of compromises, and not always that you had to come up with. But this when you write code, you built a instinct, right, on what to do and what not to do. And so just telling LLM to do this. There was one anecdote about some dentist said he wrote dentist office software. It's some claim. Well, it's the internet. But I don't think I would ever deploy code for a dental office made by programming and think that the data was secure. It just security practices, not a dentist I would go to. So anyway, that I was not able to write the app only, and and there was only because I couldn't. Uh, I in the end I was trying to find without the LLM how to implement this code, and I couldn't do it. And I couldn't find any code anywhere, sample code to do it, and so I'm sort of stuck right now. So I need to go back and figure out what to do. So when I think about what went wrong in my little adventure, I I uh, I think I tried to code up something. The exact problem I was having with this app was that I was trying to use a way to move rows up and like drag and drop rows up and down, and I was running into trouble with that. And that part is really GTK column view is very complex machinery, and it's not something a lot of folks have expertise in. And so this is sort of my adventure there to have to go back and figure. I don't have a problem with the data model or anything like that. And actually, the when I went through ChatGPT, it did a decent job of creating a G object that uh, did like setting it up and so forth. So uh, it's I didn't have that. It was some other issue with widgets and integrating them with GTK column view. So anyway, that's because there's no training data behind it. The LLM couldn't help me. I couldn't solve my problem. And so I'm going to skip this. Gen AI doesn't. I think Gen AI doesn't really teach you how to approach writing an app. Um, and you know, when you're writing application, at least in GTK, you have to really think about what your data structures look like, what parts you wanted to reveal to the event system. All of those things are, and tracking them, right? All those things you have to kind of work out ahead of time, and it's not something you just sort of write down. And I don't Gen AI doesn't teach you that approach. Sure, it generates it, but when you look at the code, you still need to understand the structure and so forth, because as the app gets more complicated, it gets harder for the AI to figure it out, right? And you sometimes will spend more time doing getting the AI to do what you want than maybe actually writing the code yourself from a disciplined approach, right? And also, these things don't may not generate code in the best fashion that so let's say somebody who understands GTK would in terms of maintainability, right? And there are some things that you should not do, and you would not know that unless you're interacting with the community and sharing them and so forth. So there's definitely a social aspect. If you're out by yourself somewhere and using this generator, you're probably going to run into maintainability problems later. But the other thing that would disturb me was I stopped thinking when I was using the AI, because it was just like this. So you're telling to do this, it generates a code, and each time it's like, this is the final version, this is the final version, and you download it, and then you're putting it in through Python, and then it gets an error, and then at some point you're just cut and pasting the error and throwing it on the LM, and then waiting for it to say, oh, I know what I did wrong. This isn't this. Try this one now, and then you keep doing this cycle. It's just uh, your brain starts turning off. If I'm going to date myself again, back in the day before uh, there were Google Maps or anything like that, you generally had an instinct of which way to go and how to go and how to you just kind of do it yourself and know how to get there instinctively. But because you're now aware of how the city puts the streets together, right? And once you do maps, you're kind of like, I'll just be like, I'll just do whatever it tells me, right? And in this one, I felt more like, if you've ever been in a casino, it felt more like these folks who sitting there, they have this vacant look in their eyes, and they're just doing the slot machine. Even when they're winning, it doesn't matter. They're just like, just going back, putting the coins in. I don't even know what the best end result is for them to break out of that. Oh my God, this this mm, this how do I put this? Um, this vacant stare, right? You're just pushing this, and you're not even thinking it, and that's not a way to write code. Something. Look, for a lot of us, writing code is art. It's our creative genius and code, right? So reducing it to this seems kind of sad, right? And is it bad news? It's not all bad news. I mean, I think I've done a lot to dunk on AI, generative AI, but there are good aspects to using AI, and I think there are some good things that we can do where we could take advantages of LLMs in very narrow ways, not an entire app. I think that's the thing. But the idea here is that can you lower the barrier, right? And I already said, I already gave this idea. You need to plan ahead and understand your data models. But I did learn things on ChatGPT. I did understand how a G object should be put together. Not that I didn't know before. Again, sometimes using these LLMs, you stop thinking and don't realize there's a lot of um, ways to go about this. But the LLM sometimes does figure it out for you, and I was able to do that. But the other thing is to take advantage of is that you can upload sample code and then ask it what does it do. And if there's, I know sometimes I don't always understand the code that's in front of me, and then being able to take code and then ask it to explain it in whatever experience level, right? Say, explain this like I'm 5 years old. It could do that, right? Or explain this from a very critical point of view, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, the other thing is ChatGPT and others are improving all the time, and their personality changes too. It's sort of again uh, the way the LLM behaves between ChatGPT uh, 4 and I think O is is sort of interesting, uh, but I've noticed that over time that it does seem to improve. So, maybe not as utilitarian now, but it will improve over time as they continue to AI scrape all our code. So, so anyway, uh, I do have some ideas on how we could use LLMs, and a lot of this comes down to creating our own training. I know that we as in general, we're not that interested in AI now, but um, creating your sample code for folks to upload and ask how it works is a great way to train uh, folks into writing apps and encourage them to grow and make them. Um, there's also docs. If you write, and this is things that you can train the LLM is to write docs so that they can do it in the way we want to do it. A lot of times, we may be cynical about AI, but we also need to lead because I don't think AI is going anywhere, right? I think it's gonna be keep going. So we kind of have to put up with it in some shape, way, or form because as this stuff becomes easier, because we were talking about lowering the barrier, but this technology, websites or whatever, is becoming more um, easier to do for people who don't have the skill sets. I mean, just look at the art here, right? Uh, Even writing this uh, slides, right? I'm using Reveal.js, but I don't know JavaScript that well. So sometimes I would ask them, "Hey, how do you do this?" So it fills up these gaps of knowledge where before you're just searching the web. So um, so a lot of it is training LLMs to do that, especially best practices. So I think that's one way. And also I've noticed that, the training material we have, let's say like developer.gnome.org, a lot of them I feel like were written from a point of view of platform, and not necessarily from the advantage of a app developer. Again, it's like an app developer might look at something from differently than someone who's looking at it from a platform perspective. So I'm coming to the end of my talk. I'll just sum up a few points that I would like you to take away from is I think LLMs are a great learning tool, but not necessarily an accurate one. And I don't think the expectations meet the hype. And there's always a buyer beware. Buyer beware. I think we should embrace LLMs where it makes sense, because it's out there, and there's also this notion, and they have editors now, AI powered editors, and if there are things that like code completion is a pretty good one because if you're writing code and you're doing a lot of things that are similar all the time, this is a great way to save time because it now figures out how you write code, and it can do much more fancier auto completion than typically. So these are some other ways that you can use AI rather than just go straight up going to ChatGPT and ask it to generate code. So with all that said, I want to thank all of you for listening. I'm really sad that I'm not there to give this talk in person. I was looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I couldn't. But I hope this talk was interesting. And if you have any questions, I can take. I don't know how much time we have left, but it looks like it's. But I'm on Mastodon in a few places. I have a LinkedIn, and I'm on Matrix clearly, and you can email me. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sri.